Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to the second day of India Conference at Harvard 2022. Our first panel for the day shall discuss gender equity in politics, the next decade of leadership and participation. India continues to make progress towards gender inclusivity and equity in politics. The national discourse has shifted from being largely centered on reservation to alternative approaches to achieving a gender-just polity. We are excited to hear from this distinguished and diverse panel of leaders across party lines, across spectrum of identities, and academia, decode the systemic corrections required to ensure broader gender equity in electoral leadership and participation. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the India Conference at Harvard is co-hosted by both undergraduate and graduate students of Harvard University. We have a strong legacy of bringing together eminent leaders, distinguished thinkers, renowned experts and practitioners across government, business, and civil society to enlighten and illuminate us regarding the most crucial matters and affairs facing India. Before starting today's discussion, I would like to briefly go over some housekeeping items. We will kickstart the discussion with opening remarks from our respected panelists and moderator. Their conversation will go on for about 45 minutes, following which we will open the session up to audience Q&A. We value the audience engagement more than anything, and we hope you will use this time to further probe the arguments made by our speakers. Please use the Q&A function you see on your screen to post your questions. You will have an opportunity to upvote questions. We encourage you to utilize this function if you spot your question as opposed to re-entering it separately. Upvoted questions will appear on the top of the pile and will be presented to the panelists by the moderator. We respect and acknowledge the fact that there will be differences in perspectives, but we humbly request our participants to kindly keep the comments or questions respectful and civil so that we can all learn and grow from ideas. We also request you to please tag us and use the hashtag ICH2022 to tweet and share your favorite quotes, insights, and moments from this panel. Now, without much further ado, I would request my colleague Mihika to introduce our panelists for the day.
Thank you, Jukta. I'll just take a quick minute to introduce the panel and the moderator for today. Our first panelist for today is Sushmita Dev, who is a member of parliament in the Rajya Sabha from West Bengal. She's a part of the All India Trinamool Congress Party since 2021. She was previously also elected to the Lok Sabha from Silchar in Assam in the 2014 Indian general election. She's also served as the former president of the All India Mahila Congress. She was awarded with the Best Sansad Award by Fame India and the Best Woman Parliamentarian by the Lokmat Group. Welcome, Sushmita ji. Also joining us is Apsara Reddy, an active politician and journalist. She's worked with BBC World Service London and written for The Hindu and Times of India before becoming the senior editor of Deccan Chronicle. She's a member of the AIADMK. She's conducted grassroots level work across India in Lok Sabha 2019 elections and across Tamil Nadu in 2016 and 2021. Apsara has been featured for her work in international media like the Forbes magazine and has also addressed the European Parliament in 2017. She's also made an award-winning documentary on the Purhal prison. Thank you for joining us today, Apsara.
Thank you.
Today, we also have Chhavi Rajawat, who has been the Sarpanch of the village council of Soda in Rajasthan. She's said to be India's youngest and first MBA to become a village head. She features among the 192 young global leaders announced by the World Economic Forum in 2012. She's an Aspen Fellow and has been recognized as a Young Indian Leader by CNN-IBN. Apsara is currently running the Eminent Girls College in Soda village, which aims to provide better education and opportunities to girls in rural Rajasthan. We are delighted to have you with us, Chhavi. Welcome to the panel. The panel today will be moderated by Tanushree Goyal, who is a political scientist. She's an academy scholar at the Harvard Academy for International and Area Studies and an incoming assistant professor in politics at Princeton University. Her research explores how descriptive representation lowers gender inequality and equalizes access to political opportunity for marginalized groups. She's working on a book project exploring how women succeed and participate in politics in India, Brazil, and Nepal, where she argues that women politicians advance by generating grassroots activism among other women and by recruiting women as party workers and activists. In her other work, she investigates how cultural norms shape gender inequalities. Thank you, Tanushree, for joining us. And with that, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mihika, for introducing everybody. And without further ado, I first want to just thank everyone for being on this panel and for being open to the discussion and debate about gender equity. I'm sure we come from very different perspectives, and this is going to be a rich and lively conversation. I have prepared a roadmap for today's discussion, and how I have structured is this, that we start by discussing two most important institutional changes in Indian politics over the last 2 decades. And the first is, the growing voice of Indian women voters and India's highly progressive gender quota policy. After we discuss these two themes, I want to talk about 3 key spheres which intersects with and shape women's experience in politics, and that's violence against women in politics, family and culture, and men's dominance of bureaucracy and other societal spheres and economic spheres. During this discussion, I invite the panelists to feel free to share what you think has gone right so far, what needs to be done better, and also reflect on your own experiences about facing these challenges that you have faced uniquely. I've also reserved some space for a star question, at the end. So let me start by fielding my first question to all of you, and that is about elections and the women voters. So what we have observed since the 90s and in the last 2 decades is that the gender gap, so in turnout, which is that women are turning out more and more, in fact, more than men, to vote at the poll booths. And that is happening across elections. It is happening across regions within India. For instance, in Bihar, women have overtaken men when it comes to turning out at polls. And there are both pessimistic and optimistic takes, on this phenomena. However, what I want to ask you is, what have parties done, to contribute to this? What has changed in electioneering and ground campaigns? How are parties, using these technologies to access the women vote? What are they doing in your experience? What has been done to actually reach out to women voters and connect with them? And how do you see these platforms evolve in the coming decade? So I'm going to leave this question first to Apsara, and then Chhavi and Sushmita can respond. So Apsara, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. It's a Sunday morning here in India, so it's quite early for us. But thank you for having me and having a diverse voice in this panel, which is very essential, especially when you're talking about gender equality and empowerment and the woman voter. I come from a party which was led by Madam Jayalalitha, who's a towering figure. She had a cult-like following, she had a demigoddess status. So a lot of times our party's vote bank has essentially been women over the decades. And the last 2 elections that we came to power, 2016 and 2011 and 2016, the woman voter decided our victory. So in Tamil Nadu, the woman voter is the largest share. And I feel as a party, what we do is we empower women at every level. For example, we have at every district, we have a male district secretary and a female district secretary. So we have a women's wing, which equally participates in the overall debate and discussion within the party. It's not just men who are nominated to the district secretary's post, which is a premium post in that area. So we have women and men equally share responsibilities. And also the way we understand and respond to women's issues in our party has ensured that we've kept women active in the dialogue within the party and within the state when we're in government. All our committees and commissions appointed by whatever party in Tamil Nadu I can speak for, I think they give women a lot of preference in committees which have to do with education, infrastructure, industry, the municipal corporation. So I feel women have a really strong role to play in my part of India. And the only way to empower women is when women break the glass ceiling to not fix it back on. I think a lot of women break the glass ceiling and sometimes very easily fix it back on. I think we need to empower other women to come into leadership roles. And also the way tickets are distributed within the party. I think when more women get represented in seats, women also turn up in large numbers because it's encouraging for them because they can see themselves in those positions.
Thanks, Apsara. And I think what's very interesting that you highlight are these segregated party wings. So you have men and women both participating equally in the party. And I wonder,
No, I must add to, sorry, I'm interjecting, but like most parties around the world have different wings headed by different, men head certain wings, women head certain wings, but every wing has an equal level playing field. There's a man and there's a woman president for every wing, which is actually interesting, because whether it's the youth wing or the students wing or the legal wing, we have men and women at equal roles, whether it's the president or the vice president. So which is interesting, because we bring in two different perspectives to the table.
That's really interesting, Apsara, because I thought these wings were segregated, but as you say, you have, for both men and women for each position within the party. And I wonder, and I know that lots of parties like within India are taking more and more steps to incorporate women into the political parties. And you can see the, expressions and ramifications of this phenomena on the ground as well. And I wonder what Chhavi and Sushmita also think about this. So how do you also see, that this increased engagement with parties is also reflecting at the grassroots? So what is happening when you have the Gram Panchayat elections? So not only just state elections or national elections, because we know so less about that. So what is happening, in your village or in your experience?
Well, as Apsara pointed out, I think it's a step that every party is beginning to take. And the beauty is that they're all recognizing the fact that we as women and even the youth have a voice, but most of the women, which I think for the longest had not been recognized. And as a result of that, the campaign structures, the formats, how the distribution of tickets are happening, that's all changing, which is really, really lovely to see. And I think that's how you have the three of us sitting here today talking to all of you. And as far as the grassroots is concerned, I think it is a step that parties had taken well in advance, because I think most of the states across India have had 50% representation by women in terms of the quota. And it's because of that reservation that women were able to at least get the foot in the door. But having said that, yes, we still have a long way to go, because it's still a lot of proxy leadership where the men take over the actual functioning of that role at the grassroots. But I think things are changing now with technology coming into play, with women having access to smartphones. And even if there are people who are not willing to provide them the information that they need when they are taking on leadership roles, they're able to access that information. And we're also beginning to learn to ask, which is not something that was happening earlier, more so asking each other. And I've had, like, over my 2 terms as Sarpanch, that's 10 years, where, especially during the second term, where I saw more women, more youngsters taking on leadership roles, and they would come up to me and ask me, well, what do we do? We don't have access to phones. If we are given phones by the people in the family, it's only for a limited duration. So how do we go about doing things? So it was interesting to see that shift was happening. And I think for women also, it's very interesting that while the traditional format has been that you listen to the head of the family, and whatever the head of the family tells you, you go and vote for that individual. But especially the grassroots, have noticed that women are choosing to take their own decisions, and irrespective of what the head of the family is stating, they are making informed choices, provided they become aware of the candidate. And that's very interesting. Also with the youth, it's a similar shift. And I think with men and women, or young boys and girls, what's happening is that men are easily accessible. So when the campaigns are happening, they get influenced far more easily, versus women who they don't have easy access to. So therefore, I think women are also able to think things through. And what I've also observed is when they see women in leadership roles, or women contesting those elections, they do believe, and this is both the youth as well as women, they do believe that their voices will be heard. And I can see that shift happening, especially at the grassroots. And I think that's beautiful, but we still have a long way to go. And I do believe that if there were ways and means where women and the youth knew that there is some form of guidance which prepares you that participation would be far more, the informed choices would be far more. In villages, because the technology has not really reached the last mile in the manner that one perceives it to have reached, there is huge potential, but how that's tapped is very important, because as we know, with access to technology, with access to smartphones and internet, there's so much more. There's a lot of negativity also that's creeping in. So a lot of engagement also needs to happen in that space to ensure that people are able to distinguish between what is authentic and what is not, and make their informed choices far better than before.
Chhavi, you raise a very interesting point here, and that's about women's awareness. So I think when we think of campaigns, we often think about, just mobilizing women, but what are women learning through that process? And, for instance, also in my own research, I find that women generally know much less about politics. They're much less aware of the candidate, but they're much more receptive to information. And I wonder, Sushmita, if you have something to share about how can we increase, that awareness. So even if so there's this issue of access. So how do we access the women vote? But how do we also, provide quality information to women voters so that they can make the decision, or they can be more influenced by the changes that are happening, in political institutions. So for instance, people are on the ground are still much less aware of the gender quotas, or that there are quotas in India at all. So if you speak to people in Delhi or in urban cities, for instance, there would be hardly people who would be aware of these policies. So when it comes to awareness of these opportunities, what can parties do in addition to reaching out to women? What quality input can they provide? What do you think of that, and how do you see that changing in the coming decade?
First of all, it's my pleasure to be on this panel with Chhavi and Apsara. And, to start, put it in perspective, India as a country has seen participation of women pre-independence. So as such, it's not a new phenomena. There are issues there, there are obstacles there. We could have been in a better position. But having said that, I think the 73rd and the 74th Amendment, Chhavi will agree, actually propelled lakhs of women into the political system. It was an experiment. It was something that was opposed. It wasn't easy to do, despite the fact that we had so many women leaders in our pre-independence stage where women participated in the war of independence, if you like, our freedom struggle. But having said that, what is changing in India and why is it changing vis-a-vis gender politics? I believe that it's a fairly recent trend in a country which has had a woman prime minister, a woman president, a woman Lok Sabha speaker, and all of that. What has changed in the last decade or so is that political parties have started viewing women as a separate vote bank. You see, if you look at the trend in Indian politics, it's heavily entrenched in caste politics. And, what is your religion? And what is your community? What is your language? What's your ethnicity? But what is changing in the last decade, I would say, or maybe a little over a decade, is political parties are compelled to view women as a separate vote bank. Okay, now, after that trend has started, I addressed the question you're specifically asking. What has also happened is women have started coming out in larger numbers to vote. It's very close to the percentage of voting vis-a-vis men. So political parties now spend more time, more focus, more energy on targeting women as voters. Now, apart from the fact that we've had the Indian National Congress that's been led by a woman president for the longest time, we've had Jayalalitha ji, like Apsara said, Mamata Banerjee is a 3-time chief minister. The fact is that the fact is that now we focus on women as a separate vote bank. Let me give some examples across party lines. Prime Minister of India says, Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. I reserve my views on how successful that is, but fact is he said it. So women are a part of the narrative now. We have recently seen Mamata Banerjee in Bengal has started schemes, Lakshmi Bhandar and all of that, totally focused on women voters. We have the Congress party, one of the largest parties in India, in Uttar Pradesh, who has given 40% tickets to women and is focusing on women voters. So it's a very, very, very important change. But the fact is, how informed is the vote? How informed is the vote? Because there is a dichotomy here. One aspect is what I'm telling you, but the other is that women in India are very religious. They're driven by religion, whether we like it or not. So the question is, does the communal turn in Indian politics impact the women voters? That needs to be studied. And, academicians like you need to look at that the politics in India is becoming more and more and more and more communal. So the fact that more and more women are coming out to vote doesn't have to do with religion, and let me give a recent example. The entire hijab controversy that is now, swallowing Indian politics is directly connected to two things: one, religion; two, women. And let's not deny it, that it's being played. It's playing out, and it's playing out in a way where political parties are using it to impact the ongoing elections. It's very interesting, it's a woman-centric issue. It's about equality of women. So it's an interesting trend. It's changing a lot. So we need to study it very carefully. Is it because of the focus campaign that the parties are now focused on? Is it because is it because of the fact that religion is playing an increasing role in Indian politics, that more and more women are coming out to vote? I mean, it's all up there in the air for us to study. But the fact is, I think the takeaway from all of this is that women have played a very important role in Indian politics, right? To be independent. But the fact is, the entire I think there's a paradigm shift now, because women are seen as a separate vote bank. But what's influencing them, whether it's awareness, information, or whether it's something else, I mean, that's a question that's up in the air. We need to study it.
I think Sushmita, Apsara, and Chhavi, I think you are touching, all three of you, talked about this particular moment in our political history where we have women, parties pursuing women, right? So all of you highlight how parties have taken an active, approach to mobilizing women voters and trying to access them and seeing them as a separate vote bank. And I wonder what you think is the reason for this to happen at this moment. So are parties just following suit to what they see on the ground, or are they the ones who have actually created this phenomenon in the first place? And going back to what Sushmita, you're trying to highlight is what role religion has played. So if we look at the history of the 90s in India, what sort of mobilization is happening, during that period? Is that then informing the rise of the women's voter? So why do you think, parties have pursued women in the first place? So I just want to ask you just, a one-line or two-line answer to that question, why you think parties are pursuing women voters at this particular moment. And then we'll move on to the next question. So just specifically to this. So Apsara, do you have any comments, on why parties have started?
So I think women largely are more independent now, and they're also like single income households led by women being the breadwinner. So I feel women are independent, making their own choices, and they're in a position to influence the household as well. So hence parties are tapping into that decisive vote bank. So
parties are basically responding to the growing, economic independence of women.
Economic independence. And also I think women largely vote for security, apart from just, how do I put it? Apart from just the trappings of, I don't know, in South India, I think men vote for various things, but women, I think, make more informed choices.
Okay, great. And Chhavi, what do you have to say to this?
I think I do resonate what Apsara stated. Also, if you look at any sector across the country, the participation and an active role by women is far increasing, be it in the corporate sector, the private sector, or even in the fields at the grassroots. It's always been the case. But now I think with also women stepping into educating themselves, parents are far more involved as well. There is that greater awareness. There is that desire to achieve something, which again, the numbers are increasing, where the ambitions and aspirations are far higher for young women as well. And so I do think that shift and the fact that we women are out there, and we are now beginning to raise our voices, we're beginning to ask questions, we're beginning to demand. I think with that shift, thankfully, the different parties are beginning to recognize it, and therefore the attention towards us is also shifting. But I do think, and this is from my own personal experience from when I was reached out to by the older men of the village, because it was a research seat for women during my first term as Sarpanch. I do also think that people believe that women are perhaps easier to influence, and therefore it becomes easier too. But of course, I'm not sure if that is something that's been studied upon, but we unfortunately still continue to be seen as the easier target. Also, we perceive as emotional. So, so when you're doing the marketing or the campaigning, and as Apsara said, yes, there is a voice, there is a shift within households as to who the decision makers are, apart from just being financially more independent. I think we're also becoming more vocal. And
I think, Chhavi, I'm going to give the floor to Sushmita so we can also have other questions. So Sushmita, just a two-line answer to this question: what are parties actually? Are parties? Why is this happening now? Why are parties responding to women?
It entails two things. One is parties are becoming increasingly aware themselves and recognizing the fact that women have specific needs, because different issues impact women differently, whether it's poverty, whether it's literacy, whether it's violence. And I think it's a greater awareness on the part of the parties. And the second thing is women have proved through the voting trend that they matter. They have spoken out by their sheer percentage of voting to say, hey, we're a separate vote bank. Don't treat us like, don't treat us like part of the herd. So those are the two things that have impacted the way parties react to women and the way women are reacting to in Indian politics as voters and politicians. And that's what I think is an emerging trend, and it's only going to grow stronger.
Thanks, Sushmita, for that. And this feedback cycle that you're talking about. So parties are, so women are increasingly becoming independent with the economic liberalization of India in the 90s. There are lots of interesting things happening in the 90s. The quota policy, the gender reservation policy also, comes up in the 90s. India is also gaining, more economic growth. So there is a growing economic role for women in that, in that narrative as well. A growing religious, use of religion in politics, from the 90s. So you do see these things are, connected to the growing importance of women's voter, which again then feeds it into this. And this brings me really to our next question, which is about the gender quota policy. So, we all are, I feel very proud that we have this amazing, highly progressive gender quota policy, which has at least enabled women to access political opportunities across local and rural urban bodies. And we have an immense, and women have proven that, they are coming out and coming forward. There are issues that clearly remain, like Chhavi was highlighting about proxy leadership, that men capture these positions. Notwithstanding those issues, there are enough qualified, talented women in Indian politics today. I wonder what you think parties are doing to respond to this talent. So are women able to progress upwards as equal rates as men? Not, at least not in my research, I find that. So what are parties doing to tap into that talent? What are they doing especially to nurture that talent? So if you could speak a little bit about, what are parties changing in their ticket distribution, in campaign finance, just the whole gamut of opportunities political parties offer to candidates. What are they doing specifically for women to tap this new talent? So I think Apsara, or I leave the floor open, whoever wants to go first on this question.
Maybe Chhavi can go first in this.
Definitely. Well, as we've seen, I think parties are now reaching out to women far more. And as you can probably, for those who followed what's happening in India, they're reaching out to women to give them more seats and see that representation increasing. So I think that's a good step. But as Apsara pointed out right at the beginning, it's also important that once women get their foot into the door, we also pave the path forward for the next line of leadership and make it easier for other women to come forth, for others to get easier access and make life easier for them, so that representation far increases. And also, I think what parties really need to do, and this is coming from the perspective of how men also vote, and just the general voting pattern, leaving aside caste, religion, etc., is that I feel there has to be equal representation. Now, I'm going to use a very simple example to put things in perspective. If the party at the center is different from the one at the state, by and large, and this is perhaps, I'm speaking for the majority of the voters, especially at the grassroots, they're not necessarily going to choose basis the ability of the candidate, but they're going to choose from the perspective of who is sitting at the center. And that's how often voting decisions and patterns are seen to be made. And I think that will change as the percentage of women who are getting the seats through parties, that increases. And I hope parties are going to recognize that and make that shift. So likewise, when the number of men candidates is higher than that of women, and also it's a very patriarchal society by and large across India, as a result of that, people automatically will vote for the vast majority versus perhaps women, even though the women candidates may be far more competitive in doing the work that they've probably already done. So I think that shift needs to happen, and along with that, society at large, the mindsets need to change. And for that, I think the narrative across needs to change, starting from within homes too.
So Apsara and Sushmita, do you have something to say about what parties should do?
Parties,
Yeah, I think, let Sushmita ji go first.
I'll be very brief. I just want to say that the two things that the party needs to do. Okay, one is a question of quantity, second is quality. And I think both matters in political representation. Now, what the party has to do, an exercise where there's capacity building, one, and then equal opportunity is what the party needs to ensure within the party and in the electoral system. Now, capacity building is an easy part for every party to do, and I think across the board, all parties need to spend more time, more energy, more resources in capacity building, and that automatically will throw up more women, more women capable of fighting for their space, despite the fact that we think, equality in India is not an idea, it's inside. The second thing is when it comes to affirmative action. Now, we have seen what we've achieved as a nation because of reservation for women in the Panchayati Raj, in the urban local bodies. There are more than 14 lakh women representatives at the village level, okay? And when I emphasize on rural, let's not forget that the rural India is far behind of the urban India in education, in literacy, in healthcare, in everything. And yet we have seen women come up in the rural. So there's lots to be said about affirmative action. Now, the question that we need to ask ourselves is, let me give you one figure, that in 1966, when Mrs. Gandhi took over, Indira Gandhi as the Prime Minister of India, there were 59 women in parliament, in the Indian parliament, but in the US Congress, there were only 12 women. So the question that we need to ask ourselves is that are we going to keep waiting for legislation to come for 33% women to contest elections and find their space in the Lok Sabha? Or can we do it internally within our parties? So I think every party, there's nothing stopping any party from saying that irrespective of what the law of the country says, we are going to have a 33% reservation. And it's been done. And I will end it on this note. For instance, the All India Trinamool Congress, which is my party, gave 17 women tickets out of 42. I'm not talking about winning, it's about giving nominations. And so that I don't come across as biased, the BJD, which is a party in Odisha, gave 36.8% women tickets, whereas the BJP gave 12% and INC National Congress gave 13.7%. So this is an example to say, why wait for affirmative action? And did you know, Tanushree, that when the Constituent Assembly debated reservation on women, there were 15 women members out of 389. They batted against reservation. And I want all your participants to know why that was the case, because they believed that at that time when India had just got independence, they believed that to restrict, it would be restricting women to restrict them to a quota. And many decades after independence, look at the figures. So, it's a very interesting thing. But to answer your question, we need capacity building and internal quotas within the party, organizationally, and even in distribution of tickets. And there's nothing stopping any parties from doing that.
Apsara, so my question to you really is, should we, go the route for affirmative action in the parliaments, or you think parties should just take the lead and go ahead with why 33%, 50%, representation?
Absolutely. I think women are becoming more decisive leaders, and I think they're creating their own cadres, own vote banks, own constituencies. I think rather than being a collaborative partner in the political process, they're becoming a competitive partner. I think earlier, in most parties that I've seen over the years, women are used by the immediate male counterparts to kind of mobilize crowd, to do door-to-door pamphlet distribution. But I think now women are emerging as leaders themselves. And I think political parties are recognizing that, and especially in our party, we pick women for different reasons. For assembly and for parliament, it's obviously women who can actually speak for the party on national platforms. If it's a rural gram panchayat, then also financing becomes an issue. So our party, AIADMK in particular, has a financing division for candidates where they actually help candidates who can't afford elections to kind of emerge from home to the ballot box, and we really nurture women within the party. Apart from that, I think affirmative action is necessary, but I think it's changing. I think it's only going to get better.
Thanks, Apsara. I think a question that Chhavi raised very initially was about proxy leadership and men capturing a women's position in panchayat elections. And Sushmita, you also highlighted it's not only about the quantity, but it's also about the quality of women's leadership. And I wonder, what can parties do to combat these kind of tendencies, right? So we, for better or for worse, we have these issues in our country where you see men taking on board on women's positions. So what can parties do to stop that? So, for example, even if we have affirmative action, or even if parties institute these kind of quotas, what can give women more independence in accessing these opportunities? If you could just say something about that, and then we could, go to the next. I think we will run out of time, but I do want to talk about violence against women.
Should I have, see, Tanushree, I'll tell you something. This whole proxy argument is very overrated. It's overemphasized. There are enough foolish men there also, who are dominated by women politicians. And I am a woman politician. And I can tell you that I tell a lot of men what to do even after they elect. But the fact is, that argument cannot stand in the way of affirmative action. The fact is, you have to start somewhere. And I go back to what I said in the beginning, that the moment you bring in the affirmative action and women come into the system like they have in the Panchayati Raj, we'll have thousands and lakhs of women like Chhavi, who, they may not start as a Chhavi, but they'll end up where Chhavi is today. So this whole proxy argument, I think it's overemphasized and it cannot stand in the way of any affirmative action. But having said that, there are enough mechanisms that a party or even the parliament can introduce to make sure there's proper capacity building and what a party can see. I know what you're saying. There's a reservation, so the husband can't stand, the wife comes in or the daughter-in-law comes in. That's what you're talking about. But frankly, as a woman, I'll say, fair enough. Still, let them come in, no issues, you know.
No, I'm on board with you, on that thought that it's definitely, an issue we need to get past, and also how we talk about it. But I think,
no offense to men when I said they're many foolish men.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Apsara, I thought you were wanting to say something, so you were eager to say something, or?
No, I completely agree with Sushmita ji. I think women should come into the system, whether they're proxy or not. I think symbolically, I think also if, just by women being there, it'll change a lot. It'll change the narrative greatly.
And I'm just going to add, Tanushree, is of course that affirmative action needs to be taken. That's how we are where we are. And but along with that, the capacity building, the hand-holding, the support, I think women definitely do need it, because there is a huge pushback, because the society, the system is not used to it. And while we've made a huge headway, and as you can see, there's Apsara, there's Sushmita, there's me as well. But when the system starts to recognize that and starts supporting, that's when that shift happens. And I just wish that parties and the system itself would work far more aggressively towards it than it is choosing to at the moment. And of course, the narrative, as I mentioned, within the society needs to change, where men and women need to recognize that we're not opposites, but that we complement each other, and therefore not be threatened by the other. And I think that shift can only happen when we start doing things differently, especially as women leaders, and inclusive as we are. I think we just need to be far more to reduce that threat, and also get people to recognize that even if it's just a homemaker, it's not actually just a homemaker. I hate it when people say that, because at the end of the day, it's the woman who's running the show, the entire household, and you cannot undermine that. So the notion of power per se needs to shift. And with the college that I'm running, that is what I'm hoping to do, to make these young women, it's an all-girls college, and in the rural setup, I'm hoping that even if it's these 500 young women, if we can make that shift happen in their minds, then the impact would be far more. And I think that's what we just need to work towards.
Chhavi, I do agree with you that we need to empower women, but I think we also need to empower men alongside, while we're, going about these changes. And I think Apsara has had something to say about this.
And I think reducing, even if it's by proxy, reducing them just to a puppet is, I think it's doing great injustice to the intelligence. I think women can learn on the job. Women can, grow their aspirations. And I think I've seen in personal experience a fisherwoman who came into to politics because of her husband, and her husband was running the show. But then eventually she went on to becoming a member of parliament. She went on to becoming an MLA. So I think, and the husband was completely overshadowed by her intelligence, expertise, and delivering on the job. So I think women can grow into larger roles, even if they come in symbolically as a proxy.
And on that thought, Apsara, I just want to ask all of you what you think. We talk a lot about what the party should do for women, and we talk about hurdles. And I wonder what your thought is about what the parties can do for men, so that men don't stand in the way, or so when we hear about how many hurdles women face in families, face within parties. So what are parties doing, for empowering men so that they do, that they don't feel so threatened by women taking equal representation within parties? So what are parties doing for the men in the parties?
I think my response will lead you into your next question, which is about violence. I think men keep women out from parties by being brash, violent, abusive, and I've noticed that at the grassroots and even at important meetings. But I feel women need to be protected and also given opportunity to air their views by the party leadership. And I think we have a committee within our party in AIADMK where women form a committee where sexual harassment is addressed, where discrimination is addressed. And I think complaints are acted upon seriously. Lots of people just don't even get a show cause notice. If there's proof, they get removed from the party. I think when leaderships are decisive in standing up for women, I think men will fall in line. I think having women at important decision-making tables is very important, because I think men make a lot of decisions against harassment complaints, against discrimination. I think women need to be part of the dialogue, and I think things will, and that's what we practice within the AIADMK.
Sushmita, do you want to say about what parties should do specifically for violence, what Apsara is talking about, and also just in general, what are parties doing, to empower men to, not feel so threatened by women's growing power? So what are the steps parties can take to make sure that women get the voice that they deserve, and it's a safer space for everyone to participate equally?
Actions speak louder than words, and I would agree with Apsara. One way of telling the men in a party that women are equals and they'll be treated equally is to put more and more women in positions of decision making. You see, that's very critical. See, it's not good enough to say, oh, my committee has 33% women. But the question is, what is the kind of power you're giving to them when it comes to decision making? You see, the biggest disservice we do to women empowerment is tokenism. And I can give you a plethora of examples in legislation and policy that's repeatedly done, and it shouldn't be. One is that, and two, I see absolutely no reason why political parties, when they spend time teaching the men and women in their parties about their ideology, about their policies, about their schemes, what is the reason that political parties do not make gender sensitization compulsory? I mean, Chhavi talked about mindset. Yes, from childhood you have a certain mindset. But I see no reason why gender sensitization shouldn't be done for parliamentarians. Sometimes you have sexist remarks coming in, even from parliamentarians and within the party. In fact, I think I'm going to move a private members bill to make it compulsory, to ensure that all political parties have gender sensitization as mandatory when you come into the system, and right from the frontal organizations which entail students and young people. So you grow up with the right mindset in the party. Those are the two things I can think of.
That would be a great thought, Sushmita, and I'm going to follow up and see where that goes. Yeah, I'll give you say something, and then
I just want to add something. Yeah. So one thing that we do, like as a national spokesperson for the AIADMK, what every leader speaks regarding women's empowerment, regarding women-centric legislation, actually gets vetted by the headquarters secretary and the spokespersons. And the spokespersons panel comprises of women, transgender women like me. So basically what every minister or the chief minister or the deputy chief minister speak is vetted a day in advance for gender sensitivity, for language that we can and cannot use. And that's something which we follow in the party, especially for media appearances, when we have representatives going to the Doordarshan or the Times Now, whichever channel. The speeches and the narrative is actually vetted beforehand by a diverse panel. So I think we also have to have these panels within the party to kind of ensure that politicians don't put the foot in their mouth.
Thanks, Apsara, for that thought.
I'm just going to add to that. So yes, of course, when I'm speaking of capacity building, it includes men and the gender sensitization. That and I hope, Sushmita, you carry the thought forward. But along with that, I think all parties should also ensure that there's zero tolerance to violence against women. Unfortunately, that's not happening. While we have laws in place, but the implementation of those laws don't happen the way they ought to. And within the law, women are still perceived as an asset. And I think that also needs to change. And when those kind of changes are made automatically on ground, be it in the urban space or in the rural, things for women and all genders across would change as well. And I wish all parties would act upon it.
Thanks, Chhavi. I think just one thing I want to share about this is that for me, what was very inspiring to see was, women wings actually protesting, often for the opposition party, that there is violence or there's a rude remark. In the future, I hope to see, women mobilizing against their own parties if there is, some remark that comes out which is sexist or misogynist. So that would be my hope. The final question I have for all of you, and I will give you each, 3 to 4 minutes to speak, is you all come from these very unique and special backgrounds. And I really want, each of you to reflect on your own experience as a woman, as a trans woman, or other identities that you hold dear. And I want you to ask you, what are the top 2 things that you would like the most change on in, status of women in Indian politics? And what do you think are the biggest hurdles to that change? So just the 2 changes and the hurdle. So I'll give the floor to Apsara, then Chhavi, and then Sushmita.
So my journey into politics happened just by accident. I was a television presenter and a journalist, and I was awarded for Women's Day by Mr. Amit Shah then, which appeared in all the newspapers, and there was wrong information that I joined the BJP, and I actually had to counter that and say I didn't join the party, I just received the award. And I think Jayalalitha ji saw that news article, and she's seen my work on television, and I was given a call by the headquarters. And the reason I'm saying this is because it's very relevant to my journey. I got a call from the headquarters secretary saying that Jayalalitha ji wanted to meet me, but also saying that there's a reservation about me being on stage with her because I'm a trans woman, and her predecessor, Mr. MGR or Jayalalitha, have never encouraged or met a transgender woman on a public platform. So I was kind of disappointed because it was they who invited me, and then they had this reservation of me privately joining the party, not publicly. And I said, I'm not interested. In the middle of the night, at about 11:30 at night, the day before I was supposed to join the party, I got a call from Jayalalitha's residence, Madam's residence, saying she'd like to meet you. So when I met her, she said, I think the biggest thing the reason why I want to bring you into the party is because I want to make sure that you're the face of equality and gender justice. And she took me into a meeting of about, I think, 3 million people, and made me the national spokesperson of the party. So I think for that, I have to thank her. And I think that actually paved the way for a lot of acceptance within the party. Otherwise, I couldn't have. If I just joined as a member and I found a local politician or a godfather, it wouldn't have happened the way it did for me. I think when a leader asserts herself and actually gives you that space, I think a lot can happen in terms of equality. Apart from that, I think what I'd like to see change, especially for trans women, is not to kind of paint us all in the same color. And I think the first thing people say is, are you a makeup artist? Are you a fashion designer? Why can't I be an engineer? Why can't I be a pilot? Why can't I be a journalist? I think those stereotypes need to be done away with, even within political setups, because when you go and ask the social welfare minister to do something for trans women, they want to just give you a tailoring machine, or they want to give you money. And I think to be included in the larger social policy is extremely important. And I think for me as a trans woman, that's been the journey. That's been my dialogue with everybody in positions of power within my party or the larger political base, that, you need to kind of include us in the social pyramid, not just at the bottom, but, put us as, as priorities in legislation and policy. Yeah.
Thank you, Apsara, for that really inspiring, story. I would just request Sushmita and Chhavi to quickly share, within a minute, so that we have time to at least take on one question from the audience. So I open Sushmita.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. I think we do need to have equal representation of both men and women across all parties and across all levels, not just at the grassroots. So I do believe once that happens, things will change. But along with that, we also need the existing leaders to handhold and be mentors to the next line of leadership, and create that support system and guide the younger generation or the new entrants into the parties or in the political sphere to do better. I think when that happens, when that support kicks in, things become easier. And of course, you rightfully brought in the topic of violence against women, the character assassination that happens towards women is far more than it happens towards men. So that shift needs to happen, and that can only happen when those in the position and power of leadership and parties themselves take that stand. I think that is perhaps one of the biggest deterrents to women coming into the political sphere. They feel threatened, and not just them, the families also often kind of try and tell the women who want to get into leadership roles to kind of hold back. And I wish that would change for our society at large. That's my two-bit for what needs to change.
Thanks, Chhavi. Sushmita, your concluding words.
The two things I'd like to see change personally as a politician is not just have more women in a party or in parliament, but have more women in the decision-making process. I think that's the key. And what's the obstacle, like you specifically asked us to say, I think is nothing but lack of conviction on the part of the leaders at the top, to put it very bluntly. And another change I'd like to see, and I'm sure Apsara will agree with me, is where the Supreme Court of India, which is the apex court, has taken such a landmark decision to actually recognize the third gender and give them the right of self-identification. It is time for this country to move away from, the cliche of women and child development ministry and actually have a gender justice department. You cannot push the issue of transgender or the third gender for social justice. So we need to make that paradigm shift. I mean, what stands in the way? Just purely not to be repetitive, I think lack of imagination. And these two things need to happen in this country.
Thanks, Sushmita.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the thought. I just want to take one question. We have time, Mika, for I think one question from the audience, and then we can leave the question for a final wrap. Leave time for final wrap. The question I want to ask is this very interesting one, which is about when women become politicians or become leaders, do they also become less accountable to people? So what happens when are women any different then, or what is going on? Why when we are pushing for women to enter politics, what is going to happen to policy making, or are they going to be less accountable to voters too? So what do you have to say? I think Apsara or Sushmita, Chhavi, whoever wants to respond.
I want to know who's asking that question, really.
I don't even understand it. What does it mean?
So what it means is, as far as I can understand, is that when women enter these positions, do they still remain accountable to the people who have elected them? So how are women responding to the voters? Are they any different than men? Are they more accountable to voters? Are they more responsive to voters? Or are they the same? What is the change are we getting when we elect women, basically?
I think personally, I think the struggle for a woman to get to wherever she is that much harder, and I think she values the difficulty that she had to face to get where she is. So definitely, I think her conscience comes into play. In saying that, I feel they're good and bad men and women leaders, and I'm not going to say one gender is more empathetic or more efficient, but I just feel because she values her journey to the top, she's more prone to kind of making more sensitive decisions.
Thanks, Apsara. Chhavi, do you want to respond?
I don't think it really has much to do with gender per se. It has more to do with the individual. And I don't think women are less accountable. The beauty of having a woman be in the leadership role is that I think apart from the fact that we are far more sensitive, we're also naturally more inclusive. And as a result of that, and also the fact that you understand what goes on behind running a household and taking care of a household and what happens outside. So I think what a woman brings to the table is a more balanced approach to development and changes that need to be made to the society. And as a result, I'd say she would definitely be more accountable as well. And also because getting into a position of power is not as easy for women as it is for men. Therefore, that position is valued far more, and therefore the deliverables are also far better. And I hope that answers the question. But again, I repeat, it has more to do with who the individual is versus a gender role specifically.
Thanks, Chhavi. Sushmita, do you want to respond to this?
Well, to put it simply, I believe, rightly or wrongly, women are far less corrupt than male politicians. Just take it from me. I don't have any data, but I can tell you from my 30 years experience in politics and dealing with men and women both. And I think accountability should be a gender neutral issue. But I think what we need to make women accountable for, women who are in parliament, women who are in the assemblies or in the panchayati raj, is if we decide to play the woman card to get the women voters, like Apsara said, Jayalalitha ji's one reason for winning was a lot of women voted. And Prime Minister Modi also takes pride in the fact that women voters are with him. One accountability that should stick to women politicians is after we get into parliament and after we get into assemblies or any position of power, what is it we're doing for the women of India? You see, so do we raise the issues that impact women and do we see it through? That's the accountability we need to have if we hold ourselves as women leaders and not just any other, leader. And I think that accountability should be there. And I wonder, Tanushree, you should do some sort of a study to see that once we get into parliament and panchayat, are we doing that?
I think I want to conclude with that, what we have to say. What I've learned is, we all are here and we value gender equity in politics for lots of reasons. So some are just purely normative. So we don't want to see such a lopsided picture of society reflect into our parliaments. So those are more normative reasons, but they're extremely substantive reasons for bringing women into politics. So from countless experience, from research across the world, we know that when women enter politics changes. So we have seen, in fact, using the Indian experience as an experiment, we know that when women enter politics, campaign change. When women enter politics, the issues that are raised change, the policy that is made changes. There are countless effects on property rights for women, for better healthcare for women, for women's ability to speak in village assemblies and gram sabhas. So there is countless research actually showing us, and that's why those are the substantive reasons for which we value gender equity. So there are both reasons, and they're equally important. It's just normatively wrong that we have such a lopsided picture of society today, Indian society, reflecting in our parliaments. And I think with that note, I would just conclude. Thank you everyone for being on this panel, and I'm inspired by all of your experiences and definitely enriched by today's discussion. And I hope to connect with you in India at some point. And I will leave the panel to Mihika.
Thank you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining us on the panel. Thank you, Tanushree, for the excellent moderation. And thank you to the audience for keeping the chat active and for sending in your questions. Yes, Jutta.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
We have some very interesting sessions that are lined up even after this, today and tomorrow. The next session will be on national education policy and its implication on education in India. Please do join us for that as well. The Zoom link for the same is in the chat. Once again, thank you and have a good rest of your day.